applied 6 coats of lacquer on the project, and I've waited for a week for it to cure, to get really hard. Now the lacquer still doesn't really look that good, and no matter what finish you use, even polyurethane, you should really rub it out if you want to get a nice finish that when you rub your hand across it, it feels really good. So the first step in this process is to take some wet dry sandpaper. I've got 320, and dip it in some soapy water. I've just got dish soap mixed in with water, and I'll just start sanding. Now you don't have to go with the grain when you do this, because all you're doing is sanding down the high spots of the lacquer itself. When you wet sand, the sandpaper almost feels like suction cup on the surface of the wood. It really sticks to it, and you can feel all the little irregularities and bumps and any problems with the finish, and it gives you a really nice flat surface that you can refine further. As you're wet sanding, you're going to want to wipe off the slurry every now and then and check your progress. And what you want to see is if it's all got a nice flat finish. I can look here on this section, I can still see glossy areas. Those are areas that were probably in the valleys of tiny ridges of the lacquer. So once I get this all to a nice dull finish, then I'll know I've completely sanded it smooth. I want to show what the surface looks like after it's been wet sanded a long time, but it's still not there. If you look closely, you really need a good backlight. You can see these shiny spots here and all throughout the surface, and you really want to knock all those down. I know it seems a little counterintuitive to want to get your finish all the way down to a flat finish in order to get a glossy finish, but you got to start with that and work your way up. Now that all the wet sanding is completed, I'm going to further flatten this out by using a gray synthetic pad. You can use steel wool, 4/0 steel wool. Synthetic pads come in different colors. You've got gray, green, and red, and the gray ones are equal to 4/0 steel wool. And I prefer them to steel wool because they're less messy. The steel wool tends to come apart and leave little pieces of it. So this way I'm just going to further out any little glossy spots that might be left. The process of rubbing out a finish and getting it back up to a gloss is really all about making finer and finer scratches in the surface of the lacquer. So now that I've finished with the synthetic pad or steel wool, I'm going to start moving up through grits of sandpaper. I've got 600 grit sandpaper here now, and I'm just going to start dry sanding the whole surface. Okay, now I've sanded this all the way up to 1500 grit, and it's got a nice silky finish to it. In fact, I could stop here. This is called a satin finish. I would just wax it up and it would be nice like that. But I want to take this the next step and get it up to a high gloss finish, which will just be a matter of using a combination of a finer and finer abrasives to put finer and finer scratches in the surface to get a nice glossy finish. Okay, now comes the really fun part for finishing wood. We can rub it up to gloss. Now, I've got a wet rag, just some t-shirt material. It's a really soft cloth. And I've got 3 different grades of abrasives here. I've got pumice stone, which we'll start with, which is volcanic stone. It's all ground up, and it comes in various grades. I'll start with the 2F, which is medium coarse, work my way up to fine, and finish it up with rotten stone, which is the finest. And the way to apply this is to get a wet rag and wring it out. At least this is the way I do it. I'm sure there's a lot of other ways you can do it. And I just use baby oil. Any kind of mineral oil works fine. You can buy oil especially made for woodworking, but I find this works out fine. So I take a wet rag, pour a little mineral oil on there, and I'm going to start with my medium coarse abrasive and just pour that on. I'm going to take my rag I'm going to work in long, even strokes. And you're going to want to go over this at least 20 or 30 times, back and forth, and keep applying more and keep it lubricated with the oil. And once that's done, you can move up to the next grit. This is to show what it looks like after I've already gone through the fine grit of pumice stone, and it's already looking nice and shiny. But I still need to apply the rotten stone and then some wax. For the final abrasive, I use rotten stone. Rotten stone, I'm not really sure what it is, but it's a dark grit, and it's so fine. And I do it the same as I did before. I put it on and put oil on. I like to use a fresh rag, and again, I just rub it through. And you're going to want to do this as much as you can, and this will bring it up to a high gloss finish. And then with a dry rag, I can buff this to a finish that, if you can see, that is glass. Now that I've got it all down to a glassy finish, I'm going to further it with some finishing wax. Now, I usually use brie wax, which is really a nice wax paste to use, but I'm almost out of it. So I've been trying out the Minwax finishing wax, and I think it's going to work out fine. And what you do is you just apply it like so, and then you let it dry for about 15 minutes, and then I can come back and buff it off. You can buff this as long as you like. I think that the more that you do it, the better. And with that, the project is almost complete. And we've got a nice shiny finish on it. And the last thing that I did was to line the drawers with felt, and I just cut a simple grid out of maple in here, and it's not glued in, it's just setting there, but I think that's going to work out fine, and this will hold all of the pieces, and the pawns will just set right back here. And with the finish, it slides in very neatly. And thank you for watching my video. I hope you made it through all 7 episodes. And if I could, I would like to grab this camera and show my cameraman, who is Wyatt, who has been working through this entire project diligently. Thank you, Wyatt.
You're welcome.
And thank you for tuning into my video. Of course the chess set's missing something. I need to make pieces for it or you can't play. That's my next project.